exactly the same description is given when a mighty angel picks up a boulder the size of a huge millstone and threw it into the sea and said, "With such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down." Well, at that time in history, Babylon didn't exist. That is a reference to Jerusalem, the new Babylon, the new city that has become the arch enemy of God's people and now is going to be treated to the same judgment. An allusion to that, of course, is present here. I saw a great mountain burning with fire, and it was thrown into the sea. Fire standing for judgment, being thrown into the sea, of course, a kind of allusion to being thrown to the Gentiles, thrown to the world, no longer a sacred place, no longer a place of a holy habitation of God. This is basically what Jesus predicted, you may recall, when he was about to enter Jerusalem in the triumphal entry. You recall he had his disciples with him, the donkey was there, and so on. But Jesus was a little hungry, he was looking for a snack, and he looked over in the distance and there was a fig tree, remember that? And Jesus walked over and approached the fig tree because it had leaves on it. And usually leaves are evidence of fruit. And so Jesus is poking around in the tree, there's no fruit. Lots of leaves, no fruit. So Jesus curses the fig tree. Some people think Jesus was just a little bit short-tempered, but that's not what was going on. This became a prophetic object lesson. Because Jesus, you see, had not just inspected a fig tree, he was about to inspect another fig tree. He was about to inspect the fig tree of Jerusalem. And just as this fig tree had a lot of leaves and no fruit, he was going to find that this other fig tree, Jerusalem, had a lot of leaves. A lot of religious practice, a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of the prestige displays, you see, of various religious kinds of rituals and that kind of thing. But when you got down to the heart of the matter, no fruit. And just as the fig tree was cursed, so Jerusalem would be cursed. Jesus said, your house is left to you desolate. You're going to be under a curse. It's going to be the end of the line for this place, which had been the central sanctuary, the temple of prayer for the entire world. You see, it's all going to be brought to an end. Well, the next day, you may recall, Jesus is going by that fig tree with his disciples, and they notice it's all dried up from the roots, and they point it out to Jesus. He makes an interesting statement. He says, "Assuredly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to this fig tree, but also if you say to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, it will be done." In other words, in the coming decades, God's people, these disciples, and many other followers of Christ were going to be treated to the most horrific persecution and punishment, and it was going to emanate from that mountain. Jesus was standing on the Mount of Olives at the time. Panoramic view of Jerusalem, and the centerpiece of the view was the temple and Mount Zion, the Temple Mount there. And when Jesus said, you will say to this mountain, there's no doubt he was pointing at that mountain. And he was saying that as you are persecuted and pray, you can say to that mountain, be cast into the sea, and it will be so. Revelation, of course, is giving us a realization of that very incident, as now a great mountain burning with a flame is cast into the sea. It was cast into the world of the Gentiles. That's the whole point of this. To be taken from the land and cast into the sea, in a sense, was to say that this which had been sacred real estate now just becomes part of the Gentile world with no more special status anymore. The book of Revelation comes back to this theme later. In chapter 11, you may recall that John is given a reed like a measuring rod and told to go and measure the temple. But the word is the naos. It's referring to the inner sanctum of the temple. But then John is warned in verse 2 of chapter 11, leave out. It's actually stronger than that. The Greek word there is ekbalo. Cast out the outer court, the external structure of the temple. Don't measure it. Don't mark it off for some kind of special protection from God. It has been given to the Gentiles. It's been thrown to the Gentiles. They're going to trample on these holy precincts 42 months. Now, of course, we'll look at that in greater detail when we get to chapter 11, but just for now, notice, again, it's being cast to the Gentiles. That's the sense of it. What happens as a result? A third of the sea turned into blood. There's a shock wave that hits the entire Roman world as a result of the collapse of Jerusalem. One commentator said, here's a parallel to the first plague in Egypt, where the waters turned to blood. The cause, he says, a great mountain thrown into the sea. The mountain refers to Israel, now apostate and thrown into the sea as Babylon had been, Jeremiah 51 that we looked at earlier. The term, this mountain, was a standard expression among the Jewish people for the Temple Mount. Another said, Jesus had cursed an unfruitful fig tree and then mentioned the mountain. We just looked at that text. Jesus was teaching his disciples to pray imprecatory prayers, prayers for judgment. It's a legitimate prayer for God's people to offer, and it's exactly what's being suggested here. So there's an impact on the Gentile world. A third of the living creatures in the sea died. A third of the ships were destroyed. All of this is simply to say that there was an impact across the empire. There was an impact on commerce. There was an impact on all of these forms of life, business as usual in the whole Roman world. We'll see a lot more of this as we go along, but just for now, we'll just have to leave it at that, that there was, with the collapse of Jerusalem, a powerful impact, a shockwave that went through the entire Roman world. All right, now we come to the third of these